what I plan to present for you today is not a scientific presentation. I'm most focused on to show you this large-scale adoption of biological control in Brazil. Now, how, my opinion, this is fostering a more sustainable agriculture in the country. I think I have been working for at least more than 30 years with biological control. And more recently, the last 5 years, we've been mostly focused on development and innovation. And in Brazil, mostly of the industry relies on the academia, the scientists here, in the universities and the central technological innovation centers in Brazil. And it's also important for us as scientists to understand in the direction I think that the biological control is going, what kind of products that we have, and think about the future of biological control. What products we need to put in the future. We just see the presentation from Everton that there's some pests that we don't have any options there, but the other pests that we have many options. And I think it's important to understand the drivers, the tendency of the market, to understand what the industry is doing and what the academia can provide for the future of the biological control. So I'll just give an introduction about the pest management in Brazil and the importance also for the alternatives for agriculture. Agriculture in Brazil, it's in an interesting momentum, not only for the biological, but many other technology has been used. And this has been has a lot of implication in terms of implications for the growth of the agriculture in Brazil. So Brazil has now, it's a very important role in global food supply and also in terms of food security around the world. So this is not an updated data, that is from 2017 and 18, just showing that Brazil is the first exporters of orange juice, coffee, soybean, sugar, beef, chicken, and here showing corn as the second largest producer. But actually, here you see it's second, but this was 2018. Now, 2013, we are the largest exporter of also corn. So with not 21, but 32% of the world export of corn is from Brazil. There's many other crops and also meats that Brazil is very important in terms of supply. We're showing that it's 8% of the world exports are coming now from Brazil. But with this data here showing that 10% of the world population now is fed by Brazilian exports. So we probably are the largest exporter in the world, surpassing the United States, as I just showed for corn and other important staple in crops. But the increased production in Brazil is mostly due to productivity, and it has to do with the use of biostimulant and other things, and biologicals also. It's not because you're increasing area. It's not because you were devastating the Amazon. So this is a data that's showing the total factor productivity. It's just basically the output, how much you are producing, and the input growth. The average in the world is 1.66%, similar here, Germany and Spain, but in Brazil is 3.18%. But if you look at the input in terms of increasing land area that we're producing, was in the last decade was 0.18% increase only. Labor 0.84%. This means that the most of productivity is due to the increase in terms of efficacy, performance, and not in terms of land. Of course, to control pests, now we're in a tropical country, so we have 2-3 crops in the same land every year. We don't have a winter. No, we don't have. We have pests that multiply and have many cycles a year. So we have a lot of problems with pests and disease. And in terms of use of chemical pesticides, that's the major problem that we're facing. The good news is that since 2010, in the last decade or more than a decade, there's not an increase in terms of use of pesticides in the world. Now, if you look at here in yellow, it's Europe. Now, almost the same thing for a long time. But in the Americas, you see an increase, but then we have a plateau here now from 2010 until now. It means that although you're increasing production, we're increasing productivity, you're not increasing the amount of chemical pesticides per land. So a brief history about biological control. Biological control in Brazil, it's much younger than Europe. So it was the only in the 70s when we really started to spread and use biologicals in Brazil. We have two important programs in the past. The first one was metarrhizum. It's a fungal pathogen used against the spirobugs in sugarcane. Was also in pasture, but mostly here in sugarcane. In that time, also have an interesting program of using virus, was baculovirus against the soybean caterpillar. Was programs that has been supported by the government. There's, of course, the researchers in Brazil was very important in boost this first programs in Brazil. However, in the beginning, those were most like unsophisticated with a lot of labor for this mass production technologies. Of course, Brazil, in terms of agriculture in the 70s, was very competitive because you have lower productivity and we need also products that were a cheap cost and also use cheap labor in Brazil. But things have been changing a lot. In the 80s, we started having some problems because most of those small companies in Brazil, they just disappeared. There's some distrust by the farmers in terms of the quality, low quality of the products, poor dosage recommendation. There's still a gap in terms of technology for the farmers. And we have seen some unreliable field performance. Well, I mentioned this because we're really worried about the future of biological in Brazil. There's a lot of growth in terms of companies. Not all the companies has very high quality. There's also the on-farm production increasing a lot. And I'm going to discuss more about this at the end of my talk. Of course, at that time, we didn't have a regulation for registration of, the first registration was for biological was the same as chemical. And only in 97 and 1999 that we have the first BT products, the bacteria products. 2000 was the first registered baculovirus product. And then after that, we started to have some products registered. Fungal pathogens. First one against insect pests was boviril and metarrhizum. And then we have the first trichoderma products to control disease, soil rust disease, and soil disease. And then 2018, we have the first product here based on a fungus that we used to call Iseria framazorosa. Now we know that this is Cordyceps japonica. All of those products here, boviril, metarrhizum, trocadornil, octani, and many other ones are from my lab. There was a Brazilian company that registered this, and then now it's corporate products. Corporate bought those national products. 2023. So we have a drastic change. Now we have 612 microbial products registered active in Brazil. So it is very different from the situation in many parts of the world. And I'm going to focus on the major changes. And my impression is that regulatory framework was very important. And I'm going to compare this with Europe. We had some important change that facilitated the use of microbiological solutions. In the beginning, it was mostly the focus of our regulatory framework was to provide more products for organic farming. So we didn't have any options, And then more recently, the government is trying to focus on replace synthetic pesticide. Almost 90% of our chemical pesticides are imported. It's also a strategy for the country to not rely on so many different imports, such as chemical fertilizer and chemical pesticides. So I'm not going to give much detail, but just show that there's an important change since 1989 when you have our pesticide law, and the pesticide like cover all the biologicals in that time because we didn't have almost any options of biologicals. But there's some change that accelerated the use and registration of biologicals in Brazil. Especially, I would say that in 2013, there's an important change. So biologicals have been used in small indoor crops in small markets. So 2013, we have the invasion of important pests, a caterpillar, Helicobacter parmigera. And this pest devastated many of the row crops, like soybean, corn, cotton, important crops in Brazil. And the government opened for emergency registration of some biologicals imported from Europe, from Australia, from other parts. And most of the large areas in Brazil, they start using biologicals, and they figure out that the biologicals could be really important in the management, not only in that pest, the Helicobacter parmigera, but many other pests and diseases. So we have important change also in terms of regulation in 2013. There's many other programs that happened after that, including here's this national program of bio-based agricultural inputs. Just an example how the regulatory system has influenced the Brazilian adoption of biological control. Some, for example, I mentioned about these two first here, but the national program for strengthening family farming, PRONAF, it's just that the government is facilitating for, especially the small farmers, to open and construct some on-farm production, also for the industry to get a lower interest rate for starting their company and starting their business. More recently, we have this national plan for low carbon emission in agriculture, and this is facilitating not only the bradyrhizobium, the biological nitrogen fixation, but other things that would reduce the carbon emission in agriculture. This includes a lot of bio inputs in general, biostimulants, for example, that I have been working more recently. And with all this change, what happened is that in Brazil, it's possible to register a new biological product in less than 2 years, similar to the United States and China, very different from Europe, where usually it takes up to 7 years to register a new biological. Well, what this is doing that a lot of the companies in Europe are moving to Brazil to explore and expand the Brazilian market. And I'm going to show you some of important drivers here in the growth of the biological in Brazil. We talk about different drivers and there's some difference in Brazil. So in Europe, mostly was the sustainability, was the consumers, was so there's different drivers that force farmers to use biological in Europe. But in Brazil, my impression is the first was the opportunity. It means that we have a lot of problems in terms of insect resistance against pesticides, including transgenic plants, not only chemicals. So in some cases, where the chemicals or the options fail, or there was no pest control options available, the microbial solutions enter the market and they dominate this market. I can say you many examples for you, but since the 70s, the first biological product that I mentioned, there was no chemical options efficient. So biological was very important. And after that, what we understand is that increased interest of the producers, not the consumers, was the producers. They changed this cultural aspect. So that in the beginning, they only have this paradigm of chemicals. Now, they really want to use biological. Of course, in the beginning, farmers in Brazil already use, in more than 80%, they use microbials, but not for controlling pest and disease and nematode, was for soybean, especially to increase nitrogen fixation. And so they already have been accepting the biologicals for a long time. what we see that the growth rate of biological in the world is around 16%, and the inoculants about 11%. In Brazil, we're talking about 42% from 2019 to 2020, 32% from 2021, and the last year, it's based on crop life data that this market increased 70%. So here's the major crops, coffee, cotton, fruits, and horticulture, corn, sugarcane, and soybean. We have an increased adoption in all of those areas. In terms of registration, I mentioned to you that 2013 was a very important date for us, period for us. Before that, we have, small numbers, less than 2 products registered every year. Well, after that, we have increased and reaching here by 2000 and about almost 100 products, more than 100 products in 2021, 22, and this is also continued in 2023. So what we see that in blue here, that microorganisms are the major number of products registered. Of course, parasitoids, predator also is increasing. Mostly in terms of market is the bioinsecticides, but you have a very different, this is in terms of number of products registered, not market. So if you think about market, bionematicides now it's very important. And I'm going to mention some interesting data about nematicides. So before 2013, we had only 107 products. So by this year, we have 616 products, biological products registered in Brazil. And mostly it's microbials. In terms of area, we're talking about 97.8% in terms of area used, in terms of million hectares used. In terms of the market value, this is about 95.9% are microbials. Now, the parasitoids, predator, still a small market, and we can discuss more about this later on. But the interesting thing is that by 2015, only 1% of the total crop protection market was biological. Last year, this was already 4%, and there's very consulted companies are estimating that this market would increase a lot. So the market in Brazil, it's around right now $3 billion, or excuse me, 3 billion reais. About, I would say, like 500, 600 million euros. But it's expected by 2030 here, we will have a market of 17 billion reais. So there's a lot of opportunity here. And are some estimators saying that by 2040, 2050 decade, that biological would equal the importance of products of synthetic origin, the chemical pesticides. So this is also very interesting data. So what's showing here is the farmers' adoption. So we're comparing here United States, and the second one here is European Union. 55% of Brazilian farmers are already adopting biological compared to 23% of Europe, only 6% in the United States. Biostimulants, 50% in Brazil, 28% in Europe. And biofertilizers, 35% in Brazil and 25% in Europe. So this is about nematicide, the market. What we see here that by 2015, this market was only 160 million reais. In 7 years, it increased 10 times. It reached 1.6 billion. So most of this increase was due to the biologicals. It means that the chemicals, they did not work very well. I mean, it's very difficult to spray chemicals in the soil to control nematode that, it's within the soil in different profundity. It means that by 2015, only 6% of this market was biological. Now, it's already 75%. So it's not that we're changing, we're replacing chemical by biological. It's new markets that biological are opening, and this is the case here. Well, I talk about the raw crops, but if you think about also fruits now in Brazil, bananas, for example, now it increased in 2 years from 31% to 50%. Papaya, more than 55% of the area is using biological. So in most of the fruits, we also see an increase in adoption. This is not very updated, but just show that you have an interesting diversity of bacteria, virus, fungi, few nematodes, but you see that some companies are registered nematodes, including cooperatives, including other companies from Europe are registered nematodes in Brazil. But still, the diversity is low. I mean, we need to provide more alternatives, especially parasitoids and predators. So around the world, there's 250 natural enemies available in the market. So in Brazil, the number it's too small. It's the number of target pests and disease is too small. There's many other pests and disease that there's no biological options available. In terms of most explored species here, we have trichoderma. It's a fungal pathogen used against disease. In terms of fungal pathogen against pests, metorrhizum, Rhizoplia, Bovaria, bassiana, and Cordyceps, Fumosaurosia or Javanica, they're the most important market. PT is used against caterpillar in large area, and also baculovirus. So baculovirus has been used in many millions of hectares, but recently the use of baculovirus reduced drastically. It's important that in Brazil, I would say in South America, it's in terms of the economic point of view, it's considered a fragmented market. If you think about the chemical pesticide market, it's a very consolidated market. It means that it's concentrated in just few big, largest multinational companies. But with biological, what we see in Brazil, it's showing here, is that it's a very fragmented market. It means that it's a very competitive market. Many different companies, we don't have dominated players in this market. But if you look at the biological control market in the world, it's already a consolidated market. It means that there's a few companies, including the chemical companies, that are selling biologicals. So this interesting that we bring more options and more opportunity with this fragmented market in Brazil. So just to have an idea, we have more than 170 companies that are producing biological in Brazil, biostimulants, bioinoculants, biofertilizer, microbial, biopesticides, many different companies that have a large portfolio of biologicals already in Brazil. It means that we're using biological in a large area. There's some data showing that we're spraying biological in more than 33 million hectares. Just as comparison, the total agriculture usable area in France, it's less than that. It's nearly 30 million hectares. So the market share of biological is too small in the world. It's just 5%. But we're expecting the near future that a big change. So Brazil stands out for present the highest growth rates for biological, with huge potential, especially because we are using this in row crop and also using cereals. This 2017-20 and 2020 period, the CAGR, this is an economic way to calculate the return of the investment in biologicals. So in the world, it's 16%, but in Brazil was 42%. It's probably much higher than that. So this is also influencing a lot of companies, global companies, to migrate and explore the Brazilian market. So if you think, I'm going to show some data in terms of companies that are moving to Brazil. But the difference in Brazil is that 80% of our market is 80% in the world is protected crop, vegetable and ornamentals. But in Brazil, it's high, I would say it's open field row crops. So you're developing the technology of spraying microorganisms in the field with high UV, high temperature, tropical agriculture, very different for the technology that exists in Europe, United States. But there's some problems. No, we have many products, like 263 products based on only these groups here, Ovaria, Metarhizium, Bacillus, and Baculovirus, and one fungal species. But 80% of the bioinsecticides, for example, based on Metarhizium, are basically based on a single strain of a fungal species. And with the Bovaria, same thing, you know, based on this IBCB66. It means that we're not exploring the whole diversity. We have a huge diversity of Metarhizium, many different species, but this is I would say that this is due to the regulation that facilitating those strains, because they are considered low risk. It's much easier and fast for the company to raise those strains. But what we're going to see in the future, that most of the companies, they have those strains in the market, but they want to have their own strain and with products with higher performance. And what's happening is that a lot of companies are strengthening the position in the Brazilian market. So first one was Coopert, you know, about 11 years ago, Coopert bought a company here in Brazil, and now it's the leader company in Brazil. It's a Dutch company. Novozyme also in 2010 migrated to Brazil. Lallemand, Coopert bought more companies here. This actually was a startup company that started here in our university, Bug. So Lallemand Plant Care also buy a company here in Piracicaba, where I live. And the last one, the last week, was BioBest. It's probably the leader company in biological in Europe, acquired the Biotrop by almost 532 million euros in Brazil. So it has been a very competitive market in Brazil. What's the major change? So major change is that most companies are expanding the portfolio. So farmers have more option now in terms of pesticides, inoculant, plant growth promoter, fast phosphorus solubilizer, nitrogen fixing bacteria, for example. So this is important for controlling pests and disease. It's also interesting that there's some products that we call second generation, third generation, that has a diversified mode of action. So it means that some products that are used to control pest or disease, they also induce the plant defense. They also produce some hormones for the plant growth, and they have a multi-function in the system. And also, there's some strains of biological has been shown to provide resistance against abiotic factors, you know, stress such as water deficit, salinity, and temperature. They can provide other important roles for the agriculture. What are the major challenges in terms of biological? First one, I think it's the way the farmers are applying. So they have the same culture of applying chemicals. So based on the calendar, because we have large area, most of the farmers do not use monitoring, although there's some interesting options in terms of using images, radar, using other techniques that would facilitate the monitoring. So, but most of them, they use biological without even know the degree of infestation. And it is important because some biologicals, such as virus and bacteria, we cannot wait until the infestation is high. And then when you have caterpillars that are in the late phase, like third, fourth, ethers, because this product does not work very well for the older caterpillars. So the monitoring of biologicals should be different than the chemicals, but we still need to develop this. The other problem is that the consultancies now, their traditional way is to control pests with chemicals. So they don't know much about, they're not familiar with biological as with chemicals. And even the producers, the most of them, they don't know how, when, and how much to use, but they're increasing the adoption. The other challenge that I would mention is that quality. So not only quality in terms of the industry, because some industry still need to provide better technology for the industry, but also some farmers are implementing their own production, that we call here own farm production. It's known that around 3,500 farmers are already producing mostly microorganisms, mostly bacteria on farm. And this is estimating that is around 22% of the total market is on-farm production. It means that most of the on-farm production, there's some estimate that 90% they will occur without have the supervision of a microbiologist. And this has been encouraged by many companies. There are some companies that are providing all this infrastructure, fermentation technology, selling the microorganisms for on-farm production. And they claim that on-farm production provide opportunity because of the reduction of cost, the low-cost production, and there's perception by the farmers that the multiplication or fermentation is easy and risk-free. You know that this is not true. Of course, there's many ways. I mean, there's some on-farm production that has higher technology with fermenters, but still, this is not 100% of the case. It's actually most of the on-farm production is use very low technology. But there is a strong pressure for regulation of the on-farm production. There's actually the two laws being discussed in our government. And the idea is that the on-farm should only be for those that are well-equipped biofactory, that they have infrastructure, very qualified personnel, meet quality and control demand. But my impression is that the on-farm production, we're not being able to reduce or to stop the on-farm production. And also the farmers, they would rely in the industry, because I think for some pests, we need formulation, better formulation, we need the higher technology to control. We're not going to meet this demand with the on-farm. So final considerations. So what changed in Brazil is that biological in the past was considered inefficient, but now this perception completely changed. And I would say that the last decade, most with the investment of the companies, better formulation, better technology of application, products with better shelf life, longer shelf life, and more options, this result in increased efficacy in the field, although we still have problems in terms of efficacy. And most important is that the majority of the farmers, they trust in the biological. Say they think that the major decision-making element here is the efficacy for the farmers. And there's also some research, intelligence agribusiness here that evaluate that 98% of the farmers that are using biological, they want to continue to use. This is the most important, I think, driver and change in Brazil. So it's what I prepare. It's not a scientific presentation. You can discuss about science, but I think it's important that to show that the scientists have to understand that there's a lot of opportunity and the industry rely on the academia to develop new products, and we have to follow the market